just for background, what was the, and if you miss a meeting, then, you guys have to vote on it, do you?
They will have to vote. So today they'll be voting on whether or not they want to approve the annual report to go to the commissioners. And then every year any flags that they raise about projects and expenses will go into the annual report, and they'll have to, again, vote on that annual report.
I just was told I was doing it today, so I'll need to reread your bylaws, but in general, you would have to have a quorum in order to vote on anything. So in the absence of 100% participation, you wouldn't have your quorum. So, and the votes would really not count. Now, the reality is that you're not stopping anything. I mean, these are advisory opinions more than anything. But, or although the approval of the report is important, so not that the other things aren't, but so yes, there really the consequence of that the vote would be invalid.
Our quorum is 100%.
I'm gonna find that out. That's unusual, but given so the question becomes is if everybody has to be here 100% of the time in order to. What I don't know is that it's just a function of your ability to serve on the committee, or a function of the ability of the committee's ability to function. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna look that up and I'll let you know. But regardless, we do have to hit that one issue.
Okay. Are we ready yet? Well, welcome everyone. I will start with the roll call. Allison?
Here.
Joel?
Here.
Stephanie? Patricia? I'm here. Alexa? Here. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the July 2024 agenda. And I think before we take a vote on that, we should have a discussion on if we want to add an item to amend our bylaws.
Attendance.
Regarding attendance? Okay, but that's what we're doing, right? We're adding.
Yes, someone will need to, currently your attendance policy is 66%. If you are so inclined to increase that to 75% in accordance with the Buncombe County Commissioner's policy requirements, someone would have to make a motion to increase that to 75%.
Well, right now we're just talking to add it to the agenda, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Take back everything I just said.
So I motion to add the attendance to the agenda.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Can I
Okay.
also make a motion to add one other thing to the agenda? Which is just, if this becomes a thing, then we should at least look forward and talk about our next meeting date, or, so just confirming when our next meeting date is. Would be
I
my-
believe that's in the
Attendance.
presentation.
Is it in there? Okay,
As well as, is it on the agenda? No, but I think it's in the next
Well,
steps section.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think next steps and committee questions that can probably fall under there.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so was that a vote just to add it to the agenda, or
Yes.
so now we need to approve the agenda? Okay.
Procedure.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, our new agenda is approved. And the next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone available who would like to make a public comment?
Is there anyone online?
Okay, seeing none. Next item is our bond project updates.
All right, so first, obviously it's staffing update. As last time we all convened as a committee, the update had been that mine and Chloe's positions would be ending at the end of June. I am obviously still sitting before you. It was extended, so my last date will now be August 1st. So this is my last meeting with you all, and James will be fully taking over after that. And then Chloe is already assumed a different role within the county, so that's why she's not. Bond project update. I'll pass it to Jonathan real quick if you want to talk about kind of what's going on with the affordable housing.
Sure. So I'm Jonathan Jones. I'm a community development analyst with the planning department. So glad to have brought Chloe into our team. but also our team is absorbing some of the affordable housing service program funded projects that the bond will be supporting. In our last application cycle for FY25, there were 7 projects that the commissioners approved funding for, and that would create potentially 748 new affordable units in the coming years. We've got 3 projects that are already in the process of closing on their other loans and property and beginning the process of constructing those developments. Just got word this morning we might have one more that's the Redwood Commons. They are anticipating an August closing as well. So things are starting to move quickly. And at this point, the affordable housing, $40 million for the affordable housing bond, those 7 projects represent about 73% of the funding. About 29 million committed to the Senate.
Or I guess, do y'all have any questions about those affordable housing pieces before we move on?
Is our website up and running that's showing the progress of all of these individually?
It is ready to be published, and it is not yet live on the county website. Our IT department is currently, they have a ticket open to publish that imminently.
That's all it needs is publishing.
That's all it needs. We're gonna preview the dashboard for you today, but the data is ready to go. The visuals for how the data is displayed is ready to go. It's just a matter of getting the webmaster for the county's website to publish it to the county webpage.
But we're going to look at it today.
Yes, sir.
James, when it is live, can you send us an email that just says it's now live?
Absolutely.
Here's the link. Okay, that would be great.
On the affordable housing bond side of things, there's been quite a lot of updates since our last meeting. So when we last met in March, those first 3 projects were all that had been approved from the open space bond, and those being the Woodfin Greenway, the Parr and Fortner Farm conservation easement, and the Lake Eden Preserve conservation easement. Since then, we've had an additional 3 projects that were brought before the Board of Commissioners and approved. One being Ferry Road Open Space, which is a project out kind of towards the Bent Creek area. You may have heard of Ferry Road development as a larger project, but it includes a housing component, a community services component, and then this open space component. And it's a pretty unique project in that there will be this kind of open space conservation, recreation opportunities in close proximity to affordable housing. And so we are funding the open space side of that project with the open space bond, and that totals about $3 million. And that $3 million is going towards the development of a 2-mile greenway, about 2 miles in trails, and then some trailheads and like some boardwalks in this wetland area. And over 60 acres, I think, is conserved on the property. So that includes a lot of conserved space as well. And this $3 million is going to not match, but it's going to add on to a $4 million grant that we got from the TDA for that project. So the $3 million kind of closes the gap in terms of what we needed for funding. The second project is Beaverview Mountain. Again, you may have heard about this one in the news, but the county is currently working with Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy towards acquiring Beaverview Mountain, which is about 343 acres. And that project, if the acquisition goes through, including some grant money that we've applied for towards that acquisition, we would be turning it into a passive recreation park. And that $7.7 million from the bond that is going towards that project is for the development of the park itself. So that, again, will have lots of trails, some parking, and it'll also include like a road up to the park itself. And then finally, we have Okoboji Farm, which is a conservation easement project. If you all know Hickory Nut Gap Farm, this is kind of the land that farm is on. They put it under conservation easement, and so that was another $511,000. So we now have just under $13 million in approved commitments from the Board of Commissioners for the open space bond. We also have some additional projects that we know are going to be coming down the pipeline before the Board of Commissioners that total about $6.7 million. Those include the Inca Heritage Trail, which was one of the 2 greenways that was kind of pre-baked into this process, as well as another just under $5 million in conservation easements. And then on top of that, we also have our passive recreation land application process that has been underway. It was underway when we last met. We were just getting ready to close that application window. Now we've been in the process of reviewing all of the projects, and the subcommittee responsible for that process will be making their recommendations to the Board of Commissioners on October 1st. And so that will kind of, we don't know what the total amount will be for that, but we have up to 10.4 million remaining, and we got 10.9 million in funding requests through that application window.
I'm sorry, how much did you get in application request?
10.9 million. No. I don't know that the subcommittee will recommend the use of that full 10.4 that's remaining. They've been talking a lot about potentially doing partial funding for certain projects, so there may or may not be funding left over out of the 30 million after that process. And of course, the commissioners, as always, they have the final vote on those recommendations, and that vote is intended to take place on October 1st. Yeah.
Jill, can I ask you just a couple questions? I don't know whether, do projects have to fall into one of 3 buckets exclusively or no?
No, and in fact, that's a great question that a lot of people have asked. So I think when the bond was first established, that was kind of the thought, was that it would fall more cleanly across like either being conservation easement or greenway or a passive recreation project. But as we started to learn more about the projects that were out there and also just how those 3 different types of projects work, we really learned that there's a lot of overlap. So almost all of the projects, well, not necessarily the conservation easement specific projects, but all of the passive rec projects include like more than one element, right? Like some of them include a greenway project and a passive recreation component. There's Ferry Road open space includes a greenway, passive recreation, and conservation on it. Beaverview Mountain similarly includes both a conservation easement and passive recreation trails. And there's a number of additional projects that are in that passive recreation window that similarly fall into multiple categories. So we found that by not sticking to such strict boundaries, we're actually able to fund more projects and have greater impact in terms of the miles of greenway, the miles of trails, and the acres conserved by allowing a little more flexibility. That's how we've gotten to this point. Other questions about open space?
I guess I just have one more being the Greenway representative. What's interesting is Greenway projects were told that they wouldn't even accept applications for bond monies until 2026, until after Woodfin and Inca were completed, and I understand why. And I know that there are organizations that are raising money and spending their money on feasibility studies in order to be prepared for 2026. Sounds like there might not be any money left by 2026. So how do we explain that to these organizations that are spending money and time on feasibility studies?
Yeah, so I'd say there's 2 answers I have to that. One is that, Ferry Road Open Space and Beaverview Mountain, those were both projects that we didn't know were going to be bond projects when this all started. And as you can see, those together combined equal a third of the total over a third of the $30 million. So that's kind of part of what happened there in terms of, not possibly having funding left in 2026. But that said, Ferry Road Open Space does include a greenway, and because it's entirely locally funded, we'll actually be able to get it done a lot more quickly than some of these greenway projects that have to go through the Department of Transportation's process and the MPO's process. But also in talking further with our Parks and Recreation Department, as well as our transportation team, there are not any projects like currently on that DOT's prioritization process that would be able to be completed within the timeline required by the bond pathways. So by being able to, fund Ferry Road and some of these passive rec projects that include pieces that would be extensions of greenways or potential future greenways, we're still able to support greenway projects with this bond and not necessarily be tied to that more formal DOT process.
Good, thanks.
Yeah. But to your point, I think, as you all know, we're doing a master planning process for Parks and Recreation as well as the Greenways and Trails Master Plan. And I think this point around there being organizations that are working towards feasibility studies on greenways and those master plans are showing, there's a lot more projects out there and a lot more demand for funding. So I think it just shows, there's more need and hopefully in the future could be more funding, no matter what that forward takes. But I think it's good to know that there's still a lot more appetite for greenway funding out there. And then, so I guess if you'd like to bring us to our next agenda item is our annual report. As you all know, we drafted an annual report that was shared with all of you for any feedback you had. There was not a lot of feedback. We have some internal feedback that was included, but it was all very, very minimal and mostly like formatting requirements. But today we are asking that you vote on whether or not you'd like to approve that annual report to go to the Board of Commissioners. So I'll pass it to James to share.
Yeah.
Just go over what's in that and remind you of the information.
So if you've had a chance to review that annual report, it's broken down into several sections where I know it feels probably pretty basic to this committee. You guys are very well aware of who you are and the purpose of the committee, but we wanted to put that down and document that in the annual report, this being the first year of actually drafting the annual report. So we have an introduction, we have a committee administration section, as well as an accomplishment section, and then looking ahead to what's coming our way. So for this committee, you guys resolved that the purpose of the committee is to review the investments made from the bond revenues to confirm that 100% of bond funds are invested in accordance with law and for the purposes indicated on the ballots. Those purposes, the purposes of this committee being ensure transparency with the public into how the bond funds are managed and utilized, and to review projects after they have been funded to ensure compliance with legal and financial requirements.
And that resolution language, that's the resolution that the Board of Commissioners passed to establish this committee. So that's where that language came from.
Thank you. Again, this is content that you guys probably already know, but this is a public report. This committee consists of 5 members. It was outlined when this committee was created that there should be individuals with accounting background, Ms. Rosenberg, banking background, Ms. Stephanie Lee, affordable housing representative, Mr. Joel Henderson, conservation and greenways representative, Ms. Allison Glacken, and Chamber of Commerce appointee, Alexa Whitman. This committee meets 3 times a year in alignment with financial milestones. In March is what aligns with county debt issuance. July, audit, here we are.
I have a question about that, because my understanding was that there would be reports on like the audit being completed, which would be more the November meeting. Because at July, and I say this as the person with the accounting background, I am quite sure that the audit has not started yet.
It's probably a year behind, so it's October's the LGC cutoff date, right? I think we hit somewhere around December last year, so November it may fit for the current.
I thought that was what the November. So I was thinking maybe the 2 should be flipped. The July is the mid-year financial review,
sure,
and November is the annual audit. It's technically by November it should be done, although
technically is a strong word. a lot of players in
But
there.
we should at least have a progress update.
Yeah, we definitely have July meeting. You're gonna have preliminary prior year financials, you're not gonna have anything for the current year, so.
Right.
We shoot for October, y'all, but grants are a thing. And auditors like to audit grants, so.
There's also a shortage of government auditors in the state.
You
I think we technically, the last one was like somewhere around January when the audit was finished. Out of our control. March honestly may be the best meeting before the audit update. Be completely, that would be like a complete audit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. July wouldn't fit. November's gonna be hard to hit.
So then, okay. So we can, just so that we know what edits need to be made to the final report, I guess, we're saying in future years, we'll use the July meeting to review the mid-year financial review. Well, when will we talk about county debt issuance?
Well, so the county debt issuance, it's not always gonna be in March, it's gonna be wherever the markets are, right? So like, obviously, we did obviously, I told you, we did the debt issuance this time for the first tranche of GO bonds for affordable housing, affordable housing, that was in May and June, so. I'll go into that more. I would say March audit, annual audit.
Okay.
Because then it'll be done.
Then July county debt issuance. Because I guess July's the beginning of our financial year, so then November
I
would.
think by July, hopefully between March and July, there would be 8 debt issuance.
Okay.
So we're in July now, and we got a debt issuance. November makes sense for mid-year financial reviews. It's going to have the most activity. It's not necessarily the mid-year, but close enough to it.
Thank you for pointing that out.
So we'll make those little changes to the annual report for the meetings going forward. All right. You might see this better in the first page of the annual report itself. I know that this on screen is super tiny, and it's also very small in the copies of the slides printed out, but this is what's in the first page of the report. And this is what Matt and the finance team have put together to show how does the bond financing money actually flow.
And we tried to, you remember last time it was horizontal, we tried to make it vertical and reduce some redundancy between steps where we could. But if you all need me to go over any of this again, I absolutely can. This is a general obligation. It's not always going to stick to this, but it's pretty close.
And you'll see that the Community Oversight Committee, your world begins at the funds assessed point of evaluate the funds spent and assess their compliance with legal and financial requirements. Any questions on that? So, some accomplishments this year. You adopted your bylaws,
Better not be amended.
which are you selected a chair, Mr. Rosenberg. You selected a vice chair, Mr. Henderson. We've also created a transparency dashboard that will be available via the county's transparency webpage as well as on the engagement website for GO bonds. We'll preview that for you guys here today. We're just, like I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're just waiting for IT to get it published and live on our website. Bond dashboard. Let's have a look. This is a preview of what the dashboard will look like. We'll show total amount allocated for each bond type, affordable housing and open space bonds, as well as comparing that to the total amount that was approved by commissioners and the voters. So $40 million for affordable housing, $30 million for open space. We'll have addresses locating where the projects are, showing you some quick information on what the project is, its status, how much of the allocation is remaining on that project. So if it's allocated a certain amount of money, how much have they actually spent? And then we've got some imagery uploaded in here as well, that you'll be able to see a site plan for that project. On the right is just an easy chart that basically shows the same information as above, but lets you know, be able to compare pretty quickly how much has been allocated, spent, and how much is remaining to be allocated for each of the bonds. In the project tracking section, you're able to see a quick project description of, which project is this, category, status. You can sort and find different projects. We're going to make sure that this gets updated to have the project descriptions. But if you click on one of these, like Lake Eden Preserve, this will populate a picture below to show you, hey, look, that's the site plan, an area where that project is located. That's out there at Lake Eden, obviously, Black Mountain, Camp Rockmont.
If any of you are familiar with the Leaf Festival.
Lake Eden Arts Festival. And then just some basic terms of how things are defined in this dashboard.
So if you'll remember, as he put in the slide, it'll be available on our transparency webpage. Eventually, it'll also be available on our bonds webpage that we have. Full disclosure, that is also in a ticket to be updated in hopefully the very near future. But the language is all ready for that. It's just, and that includes kind of the definition, or some of the definitions and like context that you all had discussed when we envisioned the transparency dashboard. It's again just going through the process of being published.
Any questions on the dashboard? And as you requested, Ms. Black, and we'll send you guys an email with the link as soon as that's live.
Thanks.
Looking ahead, FY25, lots coming. I won't go through and list all the dollar amounts here, but this will tell you, FY24 open space bond projects with their allocations for open space, and then the affordable housing bond projects, FY23 allocations and FY24. Didn't have any FY23.
And just a reminder, as we talked about earlier in the annual report review, your review and advice, I guess, really comes in on looking at those spending of the funds. So the reason why these projects haven't been brought before you in like a strategic review yet is because they really hadn't started to spend money, but now they have begun to start spending money. So now is when, or in November is when we'll start to look at what expenditures have happened and get to discuss those. And like I said before, if there's any flags you want to raise or questions you need to ask, that'll take place. But so that's why, there's FY24 allocations, but money wasn't actually spent. So that's why you haven't really had a chance to look at the spending. And then next up, I put your name, but so as you all know, James is taking over the committee after August 1st. I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that.
No, we will miss you very much. But the work of managing the bonds without the bond managers has been dispersed to our community development team, as well as to our strategic partnerships, with the potential that it may fall to some assistance from our recreations and ag and land departments on the open space side. And we also have our finance team who are helping to manage bonds going forward as well. My role will be to kind of serve as a liaison and provide updates to you guys when we have our meetings.
And I'll pause because I'm realizing I let the presentation guide me instead of the agenda guide all of us. We were supposed to have a discussion and vote around the annual report before we got into that stuff, so I apologize.
Well, actually, before that, it says that there's a finance update.
Sure. It's quick. Yeah, so just so you all know, we did sell the first tranche of bonds for affordable housing, right shortly south of $15 million. It was for the Lakeshore Village project, $3.6 million, Maryville, $8.5 million, Redwood Common, $1.8 million, and Laurelwood, $800,000. So add all that together, and then there was roughly about $70,000 in allowable administrative costs. I don't know if I'm gonna use all that. If we don't, we're gonna move to a project rather like 14.8 or somewhere around there. They sold in May, and they closed in June, 20-year principal, somewhere right under 5% interest rate because they were taxable bonds, not non-taxable bonds. But if you're looking at your flow chart, those were ones where we issued money before we had projects. Because obviously some of the $8.5 million project had been wanted to have the money in hand before we started spending and stuff.
You said they were 20-year bonds?
20-year bonds, yeah.
What market were they sold on?
Municipal market. Typically, you're gonna see these bonds be 20 years.
So we are,
Yeah.
it says here, on the left-hand side, where it's the issuance of debt.
Yes.
Okay.
So we went through the whole, yes, cash is needed, we worked with the state.
Yeah.
So it's interesting with GO bonds, unlike other debt that we utilize, the LGC, the state of North Carolina, helps find the underwriter. So they do this competitive process, and they pick the lowest of a couple different things to get the best deal. So that's what happened. Bond proceeds have been received, and they're going to now start the projects and spending. So, and we timed it out like we tried to make sure we timed the issuance out with not too much time before they started spending the bonds because we don't want to sit on the money too long.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm sorry, you said 5%.
It was like the true interest cost was 4.98%. It was because they were taxable. And if you don't need, what that means is there's private use in the affordable housing world, which keeps it from being non-taxable bonds. Non-taxable being when I invest in a bond, I don't have to pay income tax. So. And it's the latest and greatest.
All right, it doesn't seem like there's any questions. So now we need to do a vote on the annual report.
I mean, I think if you guys have things you want to discuss about it, I do want to clarify with you, if they have changes that they want to make, like for example, how those meetings align with the financial milestones, can we make those, can we say they're approving the report with those changes? Is that allowed?
I don't
Approve the report subject to the changes, but I think ultimately it would be better to have them approve a final copy.
I don't think that's actually in the annual report.
It should have been under county administration.
Did I miss that?
Oh, so we didn't tie it specifically to the month. So I guess it's still in alignment with those three milestones. So I guess we don't need to make an edit to the annual report. I was
gonna say I didn't notice it when I read the annual report, but up there, that was like, that doesn't. Does anyone have any questions or amendments or any changes you'd like to make to the annual report?
No, we're just approving it, assuming, whatever.
Well, if there are
That the
changes.
link to the dashboard is inserted, because it says include the link, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just.
And we apologize that that's not ready before this.
I'm curious because I thought at the last meeting we voted that on the dashboard and that it was ready to go. Did we not? That was in March. So what has been the delay? 'Cause it's now July.
Amen.
I actually think I can answer that question because I asked that question in an email, and they made a change so that it populates automatically. There was a IT change. That's what the response was that I got. Does that sound like what you guys have?
So I was handed off the dashboard from another analyst. When that was handed off to me to finish developing it, I didn't have the right data access to be able to make sure that it refreshes on its own. So by refreshing on its own, when it goes live, it'll be able to tap into our data systems in Workday and be able to communicate with our systems. And nobody will have to go in regardless of whether it's me, Jill, Matt, and click a button that refreshes the data. It will do it automatically. So we wanted to make sure that that was in place before we got it published, and that took a little bit of time to make sure that I had the proper rights to be able to do that in our system. So I had to do some work with our role-based provisioning with the county, which means I needed to get the right permissions to access the right data. So we apologize for the delay, but it just took a little bit longer to get the right access to make sure that it does work properly.
I mean, is the timeline at this point then truly like any day now, or? Okay.
I'll also just say hello. I'm Angelica Tyler from the Communications Department. Our webmasters sit in the Communications Department. There are two of them that run our entire site, which is also in the process of transitioning over to a whole nother platform. So there's quite a bit going on behind the scenes to make sure nothing gets lost. So there's just a long backlog for a lot of things.
But this one's in there.
No, that's helpful information. Thank you.
But the good news is when this one goes up, it's there. And then we do have to go in and edit it. It's just like an update to it. So
Would this be the time to ask about specific projects or after we approve? It doesn't really affect.
I mean, that would, if it doesn't affect the annual report, it might be better to talk about it in the questions. Okay.
So I'll make a motion to approve the annual report.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? No. All right, the annual report is approved. And then we need to talk about the amended bylaws. So I think we have. So I think we're just discussing, do we want to amend the bylaws from 66% attendance to 75% attendance?
Would you mind if I clarified something? I've
Sure.
been reading your bylaws. Your quorum is only 3.
Okay.
So really the consequence of not attending the requisite number of meetings is that you would be obligated to resign. That's what's
So if you can't make all 3 meetings.
right. And that is section 5.4 of the policy and procedures for board appointments by the Board of County Commissioners. You have to, if an appointee misses 4 consecutive meetings unexcused or fails to attend at least 75% of the regularly scheduled meetings of a board within a 12-month period, he or she is obligated to resign. If the individual refuses to resign, he or she may be dismissed by action of the commission subject to state or local law. So the committee can function. It's an individual consequence, not a committee consequence.
But it is a requirement that if you miss, basically for us, if you miss a meeting, you are required to resign?
You are obligated to resign. That is the terminology, but yes.
So basically cannot miss a meeting every year.
Yes.
Ever.
In any 12-month period, so yes.
Right. Well, and I asked because, I mean, I worked for the city of Nashville for a long time, and it was always that the board could basically boot you. But I mean, and that was part of the annual report. That was part of the annual report is, you know, maybe these committee members didn't meet their 75% attendance, but it wasn't an obligation to resign. So I'm trying to.
Yes, so I'm actually just reading to you verbatim.
You know, I hear that. I'm just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Okay, I want to make sure I was clear with that.
I'll say it straight up, but I'm gonna miss the November meeting. I'm going to miss it. I can almost guarantee you, I will miss one meeting a year. Just, it's life's like that, you know?
I'm wondering if in terms of like trying to come up with a solution. We can either, I know Amy mentioned we could add a fourth meeting for each year, so that way technically each member can miss one meeting a year. Or, I mean, this is a fairly small committee, so I think it would also be more easily flexible if we needed to, if we knew someone was gonna have to miss a meeting to like reschedule that meeting. That is an option. We're not, you know, we have November 20th as like kind of the date based on your bylaws schedule, but I would think if November 20th doesn't work, we could reschedule that meeting, right?
You can, and you could always call a special meeting when everybody's available to attend and do that remotely. And it would just have a very short agenda.
Yeah.
So you have solutions. It doesn't have to be resolved today, but I just wanted you to know that that's the very strict policy that we're abiding by.
Would adding one meeting suffice? Is that okay to do?
It would, the math would work out, because then everybody could miss one and you would still make your 75%.
Because I mean, personal stuff traffic's gonna happen at some point.
But it has to be within the year.
Right.
So that means if we already have a meeting in November, we would now have to schedule one in December.
Or just 4 per year, wherever we want to add the other one, right? We're talking about this physical year. And is the
It's
year calendar or
Yes.
Okay.
calendar year?
Could we opt to schedule a December meeting if necessary, meaning someone's missed at some point during the year?
So do special meetings count towards the attendance? So
Yes.
like,
I've been
let's
talking-
say Allison can't make November, so they do a special meeting in December or whatever. As long as she can make that one, then
Yes,
she's
even,
okay.
even
But you
remotely.
did say virtually.
Remotely is fine.
So if she attends virtually in November.
it sounds like she might not be able to.
I'll be on in Hamel in the Sahara Desert, so no. Not going there. I mean, it's crazy because it inconveniences, you know what I mean? Everybody for one person. But I know we need to figure out a tricky way to.
Well, then, so maybe, can we table this part of the discussion to committee questions
Yeah.
and vote on the bylaws?
I think so, because we have to.
Because I think
we
this
have
sounds
to
like
do
this
it.
is a requirement, right? Okay.
Yes.
So we have to.
Okay.
It was my mistake for allowing it to
No,
drop
that's
to
all right.
66%.
Well, it's with good intentions, I think, all around.
So we don't have to count this year.
No, we have to count. But I appreciate your creative thinking.
I don't think, I mean, since your bylaws were adopted, it's now been a year now, I think anything, so. You passed the first year.
Okay, do I have a motion to amend our bylaws from 66 to 75% attendance?
That we amend the bylaws.
A second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Okay, so the motion to amend our bylaws has passed. And now we need to talk about our November meeting, I think.
Yeah,
So can we just reschedule? That's
Yeah, I guess that's the first
the easiest solution.
first question, potentially.
I mean, I would think that's the easiest solution at this point, is if there's another time in November that works for all of you. And I don't think it has to be November, like,
October.
Okay.
Tomorrow, you're done. Later today, how about 6 p.m.?
Well, so I think we probably might need to be flexible starting end of October through December.
yeah, obviously, you got
but
holidays coming.
Allison's clearly gonna be out of the country, so,
Right.
Can you
The
tell us what-
11th and the week of the 18th.
okay, so those 2 weeks.
So November 6th would, be fine. That's a Thursday, that's a Wednesday, but I'm sorry to do this, guys.
It's okay, it's one of the.
It would have been somebody else if it hadn't been me. I see this.
No, this is bound to happen, I think, so I think this is, if you know at the meeting before that you're gonna miss the next one,
Yeah.
it's helpful for us to just
Yeah.
reschedule.
Exactly.
I don't know if it works. I'll just propose, does November 6th work for everybody?
It's the day after the election.
for the, I'll be hungover, so.
Just FYI. But that doesn't hinder the body's ability.
Can we use the first meeting that you all meet to actually just schedule out the year's meetings?
Yeah.
And then you all can feel good about, I mean, you get sick, then we can figure out a special meeting thing, but that'll alleviate the like, we have lives and we're going on vacation
The
problem.
bylaws include the schedule, which is, I guess, this is the third Wednesday, right, of the
You
month.
see, I
So-
see,
Yeah, well, so I think if we come into the March meeting saying these are the 3 proposed dates and all of us know that, and are there any issues with those
Yeah,
dates?
exactly. I think that.
Amy, did you say calendar year or fiscal year?
I'm pretty sure it's calendar. but
So
I've been wrong
we've
before.
got to get 2 more in this year.
No.
No.
Well, if we reschedule the November 20th to a time where we can all attend, then we'll be good.
Because all of you attended the March meeting and
Yeah,
all of
March,
you are
this is
attending
last.
this meeting, so we just need one more meeting that all of you are in.
Oh, currently the way it's done. Okay, yeah.
Jill, I see in the meeting section, it says regular schedules. All that it basically says is we have to publish a regular meeting with the
Oh,
clerk.
Okay,
So I
so we
think we
didn't
could
say.
literally have like your first meeting and then set the schedule, and then just make sure that we file the meeting schedule.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah, no worries, yeah. You don't know these by heart.
Unfortunately, no. My other subcommittee, it is in their bylaws that they meet the third Tuesday of every month.
So I've got a few other subcommittees that I want, that's how we do it. Like, we'll set a meeting, we'll have a meeting, administrative meeting, and then we'll set the calendar up.
So does November 6th work for everyone?
Yes.
Okay,
I make a motion that the meeting be moved to, from November 20th to November 6th.
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
I'll let you know November 5th.
So you're not.
We may not be at our best, but we'll all be here.
Well, remember you can appear remotely, so, and that will count towards the quorum.
So if you have a headache that you still haven't recovered from, and you need to be vertical or horizontal, then you can.
And by the way, thank you, everybody. I'll be honest, that vacation was booked last June. It's before we ever even knew what our schedules were, so.
Sounds like a great vacation.
I don't think I'll need to apologize, I think it's all good. Just happy y'all were able to do it all.
Can you pull up the shape?
Next steps.
Do we have anything else on our next steps?
We do, so, James, I don't know if you want to talk about the presentation to the board.
So on August 6th, we were on the agenda, the regular meeting agenda, starts at 5 o'clock to present to the Board of Commissioners. It's my thinking that it would be best if someone from this committee would present to the Board of Commissioners the progress and what this committee has looked at this year. You're welcome to use the slides, and I can certainly help you put together your presentation that you need. But that's our recommendation, is that this is a presentation from the committee itself. As the Oversight Committee, you're providing your update of oversight to the board.
And just for context, so, I mean, obviously this annual report is more about setting up the structure that you guys are following. But in future years, that annual report will have your commentary on the expenditures. And so that's why it makes no sense for a member of the committee itself to be presenting that to the board to say, this is what we saw, this is how we feel about it. Do with it what you will, commissioners. Any volunteers?
Just say, are you looking for a volunteer?
Does anyone want to do it?
Our commissioners are nice.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Which commissioner are nice?
They've always been nice when I've had to present. I think my first commissioner presentation was my third week for the county. then.
that 5 PM time, that's not necessarily when you might speak, just to be
Yep.
fully clear. It's,
Might be
I don't know where this is on the agenda, but
I know how that
It'll be
goes. It will be later. It's a question of how much.
It's a question of what happens in public comment. What happens later.
I'll show up in support. When is that? 6?
James, can I work with you then on what that looks like?
Yeah.
Thanks.
and you've got the next meeting, you guys have proposed, y'all move to move that to November 6th?
Yeah.
I'll send you a calendar invite so that that's updated for you guys. I should include you and you,
I would include all
everyone.
and credit.
And it's all
She was that was included in
Okay, are there, next on the agenda is committee questions. Does anybody have questions?
Yes, on the projects for the affordable housing, you've got the funding and the number of units and the location. Are all of those units affordable?
Yes.
Every unit?
single one?
The number of units?
They are also, within North Carolina statute, any county affordable housing funding has to go to support households at or below 80% of area median income. And so none of the projects that were funded in this process were mixed income projects. They were all 100% affordable. And I think, I'm pretty sure, yeah, all of them are also tax credit projects. So there's sort of like that extra level of oversight from the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency to make them eligible.
That was a good answer.
And it's all 80%?
They've got a couple of different unit mixes. I don't remember the exact breakdown of each one off the top of my head.
But it can't be higher than 80% AMI. Is that what you're
It
saying?
can go over,
Okay,
but it can be under, and it often is.
Okay.
We, through the Affordable Housing Service Program, we incentivize or we suggest that applicants for funding prioritize units at 30% AMI as sort of a competitive element in the application process, just to make sure those households that need the support get it.
one of the things that we can do moving forward, maybe in the next annual report, but potentially by the time we go to commissioners, is be able to answer that question of, and put that in the presentation as number of affordable units as well as number of conservation acres.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be possible. I mean, we already have for all of the projects. I guess it's not in this table that you were looking at, but we have that information for all of the funded projects in open space already. I didn't include it because I mean y'all's focus is on the financial side of things, not so much the impact side. But yeah, so for each of those projects, we know how many acres are conserved or how many miles of trails / greenways are included in that project. So we can definitely include that in the future. Great.
So that looks like 450 units for the first $14.8 million in bonds that we sold.
Can we break that? Can we report out, like, basically it's however many dollars per unit?
Yeah.
And same with the open space?
So like Rocky River is 65K per unit and Laurelwood is 7K per unit, so there's a big difference.
So just so y'all know, the management did ask that there be an update, a future update on the bonds. It was kind of brought up in this discussion of your annual report, that we have another presentation separate from your annual report presentation talking about the impact of the bonds and the projects that have been funded, including things like the acres conserved, the number of units and whatnot, as well as any like demographic data that we can get for those projects as well. So there will be another presentation in the future that focuses more heavily on like the impact side of the two go.
Makes sense. It's called buy-in.
But you make a good point about the number of units and the amount of money that you're seeing on paper.
It varies.
And it's gonna be, some of the capital stacks are very wide. There's a lot of folks involved, and I think that's probably what's reflected here.
Some of them, there's with the name tax credit projects, there's what's referred to as 4% tax credits and 9% tax credits. It's two different categories. For 4% projects, they can use tax credits. They give them about 70% of their project cost through that process, and 9% is about 30%. So it's one program provides a lot more funding through the state tax credit program. And then the size of the project also helps determine like what exactly the need for county investments are. And then within our program, there's some internal caps, so they can do like up to 10% of the project's cost if they're pursuing a 9% tax credit, and up to 20% of their cost if they're doing 4%. So there's some scales within our program that help basically match the size of the project to what the investment could be. So that's where some of that is.
And I would say it's a little complicated on the open space side, just because of land and conservation. I know sometimes we've gotten this question from commissioners, which is like obviously some conservation easements, for example, you'll see some are 300 acres, and our easement contribution is only 250,000, whereas one project might be like 50 acres, but our easement contribution is $500,000. And so a lot of that comes down to both that landowner donation that is involved, but also kind of the conservation value of the land. So for example, that Lake Eden Preserve on paper seems like an expensive conservation easement, but it's got a lot of really high value land, and there's a lot of other kind of funding contributions to that, and the landowner donated like 50% of the total value of the land, which is like $1.5 million. So it's a little harder to break down that dollar per unit thing for each, or it's not hard to break down. You can definitely break it down, but it requires more nuance, I guess, in explaining why there's such differences in those projects. Just wanted to put that out there before you guys see those numbers.
Well,
Like, why is this one so expensive per unit?
I think for an impact report, then I know that's kind of beyond what we'll report, but being able to say, this is the county's contribution, here's the total cost of the project, or the total investment of the project. So we're investing this much, but you're getting this much out of it.
Yeah, and we do have that information for projects as well, as like how much funding is leveraged per dollar of county contribution. So I don't have it readily accessible in front of me, but I've done that math and the calculations are in there. So we do have it to be able to say for this project, we might be spending $3 million, but we've leveraged X million dollars. So the per dollar leveraging amount is attractive.
Not to get into the weeds too terribly much, but is there a breakdown on 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom?
Yes, we have that information at 750 units is a lot.
Right,
right. Keep track of, talking about 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and breaking it down over 80% AMI, 60% AMI, 30% AMI. So, but that is definitely information that we've got on file, and it would take much for us to share that.
I didn't know if it would be part of the website or that detailed or anything. No.
It's not intended to be part of the website, but we can certainly share some of that information in November when you start going through like the project by project.
Are you asking the number of bedroom units per project?
How many units are 1 bedroom? How many are 2 bedroom? How many?
I thought it did say like the project, for example, Lakeshore Villas, 1 and 2 bedroom. I thought it did say something. No,
We don't put that on the public dashboard.
Because I know past data is saying that one-bedrooms are our biggest need, so I just didn't know if there was a focus or not.
We don't have any specific bedroom thresholds. Some of the bedroom sizes as well as the rent levels, and it's informed by the AMI levels of the households that should be served. That's sort of determined based on the market study that the project conducts. So we don't box
Right.
those projects in, but we definitely want them to be responsive to the market. Those market studies should be responding to the same information we're sort of hearing, in the community.
Right.
So, but we can definitely pull that information as far as the bedroom numbers and the rent levels that they're projecting.
And then the last one, the funding that we're supplying to them is for completion, to help them complete the total project
Yes.
in that expectation.
Yes, so when the applications come in, they supply us with a full development budget and say this is how much the whole project is gonna cost. And then the county's a gap funder, so the idea is that they should be leveraging other sources like tax credits, grants, other lending sources, other federal sources for funding. So we do have that full amount of our agreements with them when we go to contract is that they have all of those other funding sources secured before we sign a contract for these funds.
It is not necessarily the same for open space, just because a lot of it is functioning as grants. That said, I mean, of the projects that have already been approved, all of them, with maybe the exception of Fever View, it has functioned that way, where the money that we put towards it was kind of closing the gap. And even for the passive rec applications, we gave preference towards projects that it would be closing the gap, and I believe all of them are. There's a couple where the bond would be like the primary source of funding if they're awarded, but and D Review is an example of that, right? Like the 7.7 million that's allocated towards improvements on D Review is, covering the full cost estimate of what we had for improvements on D Review, but that's not to say we're still going to be actively pursuing additional grant funding and whatnot for that project. And so if we're successful in those and we don't need that full 7.7, then that just means money would go back into the pot for open space bond funding. Any other questions or discussion?
Questions?
One last one, not on that, but I don't know why in the first meeting I was in the back of my head that we were not supposed to talk outside of this room.
So public meeting laws, I think it's 3 or more of you cannot have a conversation or else it's considered a public meeting, and that includes emails. So please, we always ask, if you want to send an email that you want distributed to the other committees, or there's information you want to share, to always share with the staff liaison, and then he can say, Joel wanted you guys to be aware of this and send it out to everybody, but you guys cannot communicate back and forth with everyone on CC. I mean, if there's 2 of you that are having a conversation, it's fine, but 3 or more is technically considered a public meeting. Yeah.
I'm glad you reminded of that, because I think I CC'd everybody on my question on dashboard timing, so.
I mean, it happens, like I said, that kind of thing happens with my other subcommittee all the time, but it's just,
A good reminder.
legally, it's considered a public meeting.
Would that be considered our 4th meeting?
Good question.
It wasn't public, that's the problem.
There would be no notice.
That's why we're not supposed to reply all, because
Right.
then it becomes
Yeah,
a meeting, but it's not public.
exactly. So I guess I don't know if it technically becomes a meet. I mean, it does become a meeting, but it goes against public meeting laws. I guess is the more formal or the more appropriate way of saying it.
Any other questions or anything for discussion? No, then we're adjourned.
Yay.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all.
Do we need a motion to be adjourned?
Do we have to? No one always forget. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, now we're adjourned.